Tomorrow morning, you wake up and reach for your phone. Nothing loads. No bars, no Wi-Fi symbol, no error message even. Just a blank screen staring back at you, like it's forgotten how to be a phone at all. You assume it's your router. You check the news app. Except there is no news app. Not really, because nothing is coming through. You walk to your neighbor's house. Same thing. You turn on the radio, and somehow, that still works. A voice on the other end says the words nobody expected to hear. The internet is gone. Not down. Not slow. Gone. What actually happens next? The first few hours would feel almost like a glitch. Confusing, but survivable. Then the cracks start showing, and they show up faster than most people would expect. Start with money. Nearly every transaction you make today, tapping a card, using a banking app, even scanning a barcode at checkout, relies on a connection to a network somewhere. Researchers at the Federal Reserve have noted that the vast majority of U.S. payment volume now flows through digital and electronic channels rather than physical cash. Without the internet, most of those systems simply stop verifying anything. Cash, suddenly, becomes the only thing anyone trusts. And most people, by design, don't keep much of it around. Within a day, grocery stores hit a different wall. Modern supply chains run on constant digital coordination, tracking inventory, triggering automatic reorders, routing delivery trucks in real time. Logistics researchers have pointed out that most retailers operate on lean, just-in-time inventory models, meaning shelves are restocked based on continuous data flow rather than large backup supply. Cut that flow, and a store that looks fully stocked today can look strangely empty within 72 hours. Now think about something you've probably never once considered: your water. In many cities, water treatment plants monitor and adjust chemical balances using internet-connected control systems. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has flagged this increasing reliance on networked infrastructure as both an efficiency gain and a vulnerability. Most systems have manual backups. But manual means slower. And slower means every single one of those plants needs a human physically present, watching gauges, adjusting valves by hand, the way it was done decades ago. Hospitals face perhaps the sharpest cliff of all. Electronic health records, patient monitoring systems, even prescription databases, nearly all of it now runs through networked systems. A report from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services highlighted that healthcare has become one of the most digitally dependent sectors in the country. Doctors would revert to paper charts. Slower? Yes, but not impossible. The real danger sits in the systems few people ever think about. Networked ventilators, insulin pumps, and monitoring equipment that quietly assume connectivity will always be there. Then there's the matter of simply knowing what's happening at all. For the first time in decades, information wouldn't travel faster than rumor. No live updates, no verified sources refreshing by the second. Just word of mouth, spreading unevenly, distorting slightly with every retelling, the same way it did for most of human history before satellites and fiber optic cables existed. Governments would likely fall back on emergency broadcast systems, AM and FM radio, and physical printed bulletins, tools most people under 40 have never actually had to rely on. Air travel would face its own quiet crisis. Modern aviation depends on continuous digital communication between aircraft, control towers, and satellite navigation systems. Aviation safety researchers have long noted that while planes can technically fly using older instrument methods, the sheer coordination required to safely manage global air traffic without network systems would force a drastic reduction in flights almost overnight. Thousands of planes already in the air would need to land using backup procedures. Many pilots have only ever trained for, never actually used. Financial markets, almost entirely electronic today, would face something close to paralysis. Stock exchanges depend on high-speed digital trading infrastructure processing millions of transactions per second. Without it, most exchanges would likely suspend trading entirely, since older manual trading floors, the kind that once defined Wall Street, no longer exist in any functional capacity for a market this size. So somewhere around day 3, something strange starts happening. People start talking to each other again, actually talking, face to face, because there's genuinely no other option left. Psychologist Jean Twenge's research on social media and well-being has pointed to a measurable rise in feelings of isolation correlating with increased screen time over the past decade. Now imagine that trend reversing overnight, not through willpower, but through simple absence. Knocking on a neighbor's door for information wouldn't be an inconvenience. It would be the only option. Something else shifts too. Boredom returns. Real, uncomfortable, unfilled boredom, the kind an infinite scroll has spent the last 15 years quietly erasing from human experience. Some people would panic in that silence. Others might realize, for the first time in years, how loud their own thoughts actually are. Children would notice it too, maybe most of all. An entire generation that has never experienced a slow, disconnected afternoon would suddenly be handed one, whether they wanted it or not. Educators who study attention and digital habits have observed that unstructured, screen-free time tends to rebuild focus and creativity that constant connectivity gradually erodes. Whether that silver lining would feel like relief or torment would probably depend entirely on the person. By the end of the first week, entire industries would essentially stop functioning. Remote work, largely dependent on cloud tools and video calls, would grind to a halt. Global trade, dependent on shipping routes, financial systems, and international cooperation, would fracture as nations turned inward to manage their own survival. Governments themselves would face an unfamiliar challenge, coordinating national responses using systems built decades before digital communication existed, dusting off protocols nobody expected to actually need again. And yet, humans have lived through worse collapses of infrastructure before. After large-scale disasters, communities have repeatedly shown a pattern researchers call convergence behavior, strangers spontaneously organizing, sharing resources, forming makeshift systems of trust almost immediately once formal systems fail. Disaster sociologist Enrico Quarantelli documented this exact pattern across multiple crises, finding that panic is far rarer than assumed, and cooperation is the more common human response. Some communities would adapt faster than others. Rural areas, already less dependent on constant connectivity for daily survival, might barely notice the disruption beyond inconvenience. Dense cities, built entirely around the assumption of uninterrupted digital coordination, would feel the strain first and hardest. So the honest answer to what would happen if the internet disappeared tomorrow isn't purely catastrophe, and it isn't purely liberation either. It's both tangled together. Real suffering for the vulnerable, the isolated, the medically dependent. And alongside that, an unmistakable return of something the internet slowly, quietly displaced, the necessity of your actual neighbors, your actual voice, your actual attention, undivided, because there would finally be nothing left to divide it. Maybe that's the most unsettling part of this whole thought experiment. Not the collapse itself, but how much of what we call connection in a world with the internet might actually just be its shadow. And how strange it is that it might take losing the whole thing, completely and all at once, for most people to finally notice the difference.